Welcome back to another live episode of Dynasty Theory. Today we're going to talk about some potential bounce back tight ends, and I think just some tight ends in general that from a production standpoint might be a little undervalued that Mitch might be intrigued by. What's going on, Mitch?
Hey, these aren't ones that I'm being intrigued by. I'm just saying these are the ones that definitely had a higher dynasty value last offseason. Even if they had a decent season, bad season, whatever, they've dropped quite a bit to this one. I think it just shows how reactionary we can be with certain positions. Like, we'll be stubborn with wide receivers, right? If they fall off, we're like, no. This wide receiver's we have complete faith in him. If that tight end doesn't do exactly what we think they are, we don't care. Like, they're completely. We have George Kittle on this list today. George Kittle is a great tight end. He dropped 6 spots in the positional rankings, which is a huge amount because, sorry, there aren't 12 good tight ends in the NFL. So, yeah, I mean, this is just, it's a fun show. I like it.
Well, I think too, like Kittle and then the first guy we'll talk about in Dallas Goedert, they're getting older. Like that certainly is a factor, but also it is the amount of young tight ends that either start to separate themselves from the pack or, there is that hope, that they're going to move forward. Like we saw a great year from David Njoku, and he's 28 years old. A lot of people in on Jake Ferguson, Hawkinson, 27. And then you have all those guys above: Kincaid, Bowers, Pitts, Andrews, McBride, Laporta. So I think it makes sense that they dropped in value, but I understand what you're saying in terms of there are discounts to be had here.
Yeah, and we love those younger tight ends. We do. I mean, there's two of them on the bottom of the list that were ranked highly last year because they were young. They were in this exact same situation, right? But they didn't produce, and all of a sudden the bottom has completely fallen out on these guys. So it's just something to keep in mind while we're going through these guys on the show.
And that's something too, you made a good point. Like there's these young tight ends. Every year it happens where they have such high expectations from an efficiency standpoint in the previous season. We saw it with Alberto, where we have a guy on this list that we're going to talk about where you look at yards per route run, targets per route run. Like they check those boxes, but the sample size was small enough where it kind of should raise a red flag. But with the tight end position, we know it's one of the hardest positions to learn. We know it's the one from a fantasy perspective that takes some time to develop, unless you are Sam Laporta, unless you are hopefully Brock Bowers. But I mean, hell, even look at Trey McBride, who is now the tight end 2 for dynasty purposes. He was not good.
Yeah.
By any measure, by any stretch of the imagination, he was not good throughout his rookie year. So let's talk about some tight ends, some younger, some older. And then we're going to, as we typically do, go through recently completed trades that have actually taken place. So Mitch, Dallas Goedert, 29 years old. Last year, didn't play all the throughout the entire season. I think he missed 3 games, but 59 receptions, 592 yards, 3 touchdowns. You pulled dynasty rankings from last year. You were trying to find a source just to compare how far they've dropped. So from PFF, and we typically don't use PFF rankings, but PFF dynasty rankings last year, Dallas Goedert was tight end 6. I have him at tight end 13. Dynasty Daddy ADP has him at tight end 14. And Fantasy Calc, he's coming in at tight end 16. So even though I'm 13 here, I'm still higher than the bunch.
You are, like, you look at the offense right now. They have A.J. Brown, they have Devontae Smith, and they have nothing. I mean, Barkley might come in, but they've never really thrown to the running back slot. Maybe they'll switch. Dallas Goedert, if healthy, is going to have, in tight end premium leagues, he's going to be a top 10 tight end. There's like no doubt in my mind that's going to happen. And I know he's 29. I know he's been injured, but he's always been a good tight end. So in my view, I think this is like the perfect buying opportunity on a guy like this. I know he's a little bit older, but I'm still willing to buy on most of these trades, to be honest.
And remember, when we discuss tight ends, I always like to provide the additional context. We're looking at it from a league where you have to start 2 tight ends, and it's like a start 10 or start 11 in general. We've gotten a lot of polls in the Discord from one of our patrons, Remdog, and it's a 14-team league, start 14, but you have to start 2 tight ends. But
good Lord,
I know, massive starting requirements, right? But the larger the starting lineup, the more it neutralizes that start 2 tight end aspect. So when we're looking at this, it's a start 1, 2 PPR for tight ends, or typically start 2, but you have pretty standard normal starting requirements across the board elsewhere. So just to keep that in mind, you know, you look at these, especially the trades that are completed, and you're like, if there's no tight end premium, these are a no-brainer. So I just like to provide that additional context. And then if you like today's episode, hit the like button. And don't forget to subscribe. We're live every single Sunday morning, at least until the regular season gets here. And then we're going to be figuring out our in-season content schedule. But thanks for checking out the show here. So first up, Dallas Goedert. Like we already mentioned the overall offense. Here's a few trades. Dallas Goedert and Evan Hull for Marshawn Lloyd. This is in 2 PPR for tight ends.
I think this is a trade that could happen in a lot of leagues, to be honest, because the Lloyd hype is just building and building. I guarantee in training camp it's just going to keep building, but I'm taking Dallas Goedert here. Even if I'm not really contending and I'm just a middling team, I like what Dallas Goedert is going to give me weekly in those premium leagues.
Yeah, I mean, and this offense too, like you have Kellen Moore coming over from the Chargers, who was previously at Dallas. And yeah, there's question marks there, but Kellen Moore does some things that I think people are going to like for fantasy purposes when it comes to the tight ends. Last year, yes, Dallas Goedert played 14 games, but the tight end group in general was at a whopping 18% target share. Okay. And then the Chargers last year were at 22%. The Cowboys in 2022 were at 24%. So I really think Kellen Moore, as the offensive coordinator here in Philadelphia, is going to open things up for Dallas Goedert. And I'm not suggesting that A.J. Brown or Devontae Smith aren't going to put up what we're expecting or maybe even exceed that. But I think it's really going to benefit Dallas Goedert here. And like, even though I have that significant drop from last year's ranking to today's dynasty value, I'm still above market in many spots. So that I'm going Dallas Goedert there over Marshawn Lloyd as well.
And real quick, just to hit on what you brought up, Kellen Moore offenses play at a very high pace. I mean, the Cowboys were extremely high pace. They continue that. The Chargers were extremely high pace, even when they were bad last year. I fully expect for fantasy opportunities to go up by quite a bit just because Kellen Moore is the offensive coordinator, because Brian Johnson, I loved him when he was the quarterback at Utah, right? But he just wasn't it as an offensive coordinator.
All right, this next one's a fun one. Travis Kelce for Dallas Goedert in a 26 first.
26 first with the package. That's how I'm looking at this one.
Like, I have had trouble moving Travis Kelce for 26 first by himself.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, in a lot of spots, if I'm not contending and I'm finally looking to move Travis Kelce for my team. So give me Goedert there. So that's 2 for 2, where the market is showing that we can get Dallas Goedert at a fairly nice price. Dallas Goedert, a 26 first, another 26 first for Trey McBride and Jalen McMillan. And that's 2 PPR for tight ends.
See, that one, I want to go with McBride because I want that young stud, but 226 first. There's just so much you could do with that in Dynasty when you have extra first and they're 2 years in advance. I'm taking the package just because I know I could do a lot more with the package than I can do with just having McBride on my team. I like the value, though. I think the value is more than fair.
Yeah, this is a really tough one for me. The picks 2 years out, obviously, they're deflated in value today. They are going to rise. But like this is a move. Like you're hoping to consolidate assets into these premium players at premium positions in this format. When I was going through the trades that you pulled, I think this was one of the most challenging ones, not just for Dallas Goedert, but across the board in general.
Yeah.
Oh man, help us out. And if you're in the chat, if you're watching back, would you rather have Dallas Goedert in a pair of 26 firsts or Trey McBride and Jalen McMillan in 2 PPR for tight ends? Like the production you're probably going to get is close enough for at least 1 year. Oh man. Roster construction and team direction come into play, but I'm going to go Trey McBride.
Oh, okay. Good for you.
I got there. I'm going to go Trey McBride. You're looking to consolidate into those high-end assets. And I really expect big things from Kyler Murray here.
Yeah.
In 2024 and hopefully beyond. 25 second for Dallas Goedert.
I think this is the value, right? This is what it is. I'm taking Dallas Goedert in almost every league unless somehow I think I'm the 201 or the 202, right?
Would you add another 25 second to get Dallas Goedert?
I would. Yep.
So the pair of 25 seconds. Dallas Goedert for me is in that range where I'm going to take a future. I'm going to take a 25 first. I'm going to take a random 26 first, but I'm going to add to the second. Like I always talk about that. He is in that awkward range. So I would add a piece there. Going back to the Trey McBride, hard to give up McBride all the same. Like that's a fun trade. And it's a good one because you're getting that production from Goedert and then the future insulation, but I don't want to spend too much time here on a trade that we already passed here.
Yeah,
so
but I agree. Like it's what we see. It's when you have those upper echelon players, whether it's Justin Jefferson or one of Joe Burrow, one of the high-end running backs. This is kind of, you'll see offers like this to where you'll get about their value in future draft picks with some small piece added on, right? And if it's, are you willing to take that discount? Are you willing to be like, hey, I could get a 3-for-1 here and help rebuild my team? But those are just lotto picks. Maybe you end up with Jameson Williams, right? Then all of a sudden you're like, oh, well, that didn't work out all that well when that was my first round pick.
I think if anything that when looking at the Dallas Goedert market, if we can add anything with a 25 second of, let's say, third value, maybe late second value, like look around in your leagues. Is the team that has Dallas Goedert, are they in a position to compete? Because I think if the answer is no, especially if he's on their trade block, there's probably going to be a chance that you can acquire him at a reasonable price. So that's my challenge. That is the direct order here that I'm sending out. And I'm going to go test the waters in my league, because if there are, and I think there's multiple like that, if you can get something like that done, that's a win for me. All right. Pat Freiermuth, very interesting point of conversation here, center of the conversation for, over the last several weeks, especially in the Discord. There have been a lot of conversations that have come up. Ron, praise me. Oh man, crazy. So PFF Dynasty rank last year, tight end 7. Like he had 2 extremely good first 2 years. Okay. And then we saw what happened last year. 32 receptions, 308 yards, 2 touchdowns. He was still like 9 points per game in 2 PPR.
Yeah.
Like as bad as he was, now you have Russell Wilson and or Justin Fields that he'll be playing with in the 24 season. You have Arthur Smith coming in, who in general is a good tight end OC. Is he going to be the good tight end OC for the tight end we want?
Yes.
That's the question. So we'll see how that plays out. But I have him at tight end 14 now. Dynasty Daddy ADP has him at tight end 17. And Fantasy Calc right around where I am at 13. He's young enough. We saw it to start his career. He's going to be an impending free agent. after this season. How do you view Pat Freiermuth before we get into the trades?
He's someone that I wanted to buy in on early in the offseason. He was a guy I was like, look, because like we brought up the first of the show, he's a young tight end that didn't do well for a year. So then all of a sudden he turns it into a tight end 2 when he was a mid tight end 1 the previous seasons as far as rankings go, right? So I want to buy into him, but I do think Russell Wilson is going to be the starter. Russell Wilson has never thrown to tight ends. Just doesn't. It's not, whatever reason, he doesn't like throwing to that portion of the field that tight ends are on. And I don't think the offensive coordinator is going to change things because Russell Wilson is so far into his career now. I don't see him changing how he plays. So I want to buy into him, but I just can't. I don't think Justin Fields is good for any pass catcher. I mean, he might be good for George Pickens, but that's about it. And
he was good for Cole Kmet.
He was, but Cole Kmet is a vastly different tight end than I think Pat Freiermuth is, to be honest. I think he runs different routes than what Pat Freiermuth does. So just in my view, I'm kind of out Pat Freiermuth at this point.
Out on Pat. All right. 12 team. 2 PPR for tight ends. Pat Freiermuth for Tyjae Spears.
Tyjae Spears for me.
Cop out. I'm trying to limit it, but I have them tiered together.
I'm going to hedge.
I'm going to get my clippers out. I'm going to hedge.
Yeah.
Pat Freiermuth for a 25-second.
I'm probably going to go the 25-second here.
I will go Pat Freiermuth, and I believe I paid that price at least once during the offseason. Pat Freiermuth and a 25-second for Zay Flowers.
Zay Flowers is my guy. Like I think Zay Flowers is going to be one of the wide receivers that we kind of like, but no one, is really going and acquiring. But after this season, everyone's going to be like, oh man, we should have got out and got some more Zay Flowers.
Like his peripheral stats last year, but then you look at it like the touchdown splits, I think, were drastically different with and without Mark Andrews.
Yes,
so that'll be interesting to see how it plays out. I think the volume could increase, so it's going to offset any dip in touchdown rate for him. But with that said, and I love Pat Freiermuth, I think he's going to have a solid year at his current price. You can get more than Pat Freiermuth in a 25-second for Zay Flowers.
I would hope so. Yeah.
So I'm going to go Zay Flowers there. It's kind of one of those situations you add up enough pieces, and I know it's only 2 here, but like I'm a little bit lower than market on Zay Flowers. I want to see here. Yeah, like I have him at wide receiver 25. He's wide receiver 20 to 22 in a lot of spots. 59th overall. I would tier down in general. Zay over Addison, yes.
Yeah, no hesitation for me.
Yeah, I have a tier separation there. So that's a good question, but that's an easy one for me. Okay, last trade. Pat Freiermuth, Will Shipley, and a 25 first for Christian McCaffrey.
We talk a lot about, hey, if you could get out of Christian McCaffrey for this, it's a good trade. It's I don't think this is nearly enough for Christian McCaffrey. If I'm only getting a 25 first, I want another piece that I can fully count on because Christian McCaffrey is still by far the best fantasy running back in the NFL. This is not close to enough for me.
Does this change for you if you've been shopping Christian McCaffrey, you're not contending, you haven't been able to move him, so you're like, okay, well, I'll just hold him. You have your own 25 first, so if you can unload Christian McCaffrey, you would think your potential points would come down. And the 25 first you're getting is from another team that is garbage. Like it's not that team's first. Yeah. Would that change it all?
Yeah, I mean, if you could say, hey, this is going to be the 103 or 104 next year, then yeah, I could definitely tuck myself into it. If it's a purely random, could be the 108, then no, this isn't enough for me to move Christian McCaffrey, even in those, because I believe I can at some point in the season. Someone's going to be like, I'm a contender. Here's my 3 broken players that are injured on IR now, and here's my next year's first, and give me Christian McCaffrey so I can make a run.
Okay. All right. George Kittle. Mm-hmm. And this is interesting because we talk about bounce back and you think, oh, he must have had a bad year last year.
No.
65 receptions, over 1,000 yards, 6 touchdowns. Like he had a great season.
Yeah, he was like twice as good as Dallas Goedert was, who was pretty good last year. Yeah.
Like, it blows my mind that we even have to talk about George Kittle in a bounce back situation.
But he was tight end 5 last year. And I remember seeing him go in drafts as tight end 5 last year. And now he's tight end 11, tight end 10. I don't fully understand it, man.
He's 30 years old. So, I mean, that's it right there. Like,
that's it. That's it. He's like, oh, he's 30. But hey, let's go out and buy Travis Kelce, who's now like 36. It's all right.
Yeah, George Kittle, he was right under 17 points per game. But like, it's a fun topic though. And before we even get in any trades, before we kind of dig in, like Evan Ingram last year, just over 19 points per game in 2 PPR. George Kittle, just under 17. So let's say 2.5 points. Where do you fall on the George Kittle versus Evan Ingram? They are not only back-to-back in a lot of tight end rankings and values, but they're back-to-back in a lot of overall value and rankings. So every position across the board. Evan Ingram, George Kittle, where do you stand?
I'm going with the one of the better offense. Like, I understand.
Evan Ingram.
Yeah. I like Evan Ingram. Like, I understand his upside. His ceiling is probably higher than George Kittle's ceiling this year because there isn't as good of target competition than what George Kittle has to deal with. But I just have faith that Kyle Shanahan will always have George Kittle get his, because I mean, you saw during the receiver show is like on George Kittle's birthday, he had 3 touchdowns, and you can like tell that they wrote these up as like, hey, here's what we're going to do. He got 3 catches, 3 touchdowns. And I mean, the show's awesome just because it shows that different side of things. And like, I can't remember, there was one coach, something happened afterwards. He's like, don't worry, I'm gonna get you yours. And it's just nice to know that some coaches are like, they're paying attention. Yes, we're winning, but yeah, we probably could have got that guy a touchdown, but we didn't. But don't worry, we're going to get that back to you. It's just nice to see the human element a little bit, right?
Human element.
And my wife watched the show with me. She was like, we could hang out with George Kittle. I'm like, I would cut off a limb to hang out with George Kittle, but I probably won't have that.
Which extremity? How
doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. 10 minutes with George Kittle, that'd be worth it.
All right. There you have it. Man, we need to find a way to arrange a meeting here. All right. Anyway, so we're talking about George Kittle stats. Last year's PFF Dynasty ranking when he was a young buck at 29 years old was tight end 5. He's a little bit lower today overall. Dynasty Daddy ADP has him at tight end 10. Fantasy Calc has him at 9. I have him clumped in that 8 to 12 tier. Another fun one I think is like George Kittle versus Jake Ferguson. I know a lot of people, they look at the youth. I still have George Kittle just above Jake Ferguson.
I take Kittle. Yep.
Yeah. And like, I think the lower the tight end premium, the more George Kittle needs to be elevated compared to other tight ends.
Yes, I completely agree.
Because he can pop off that 60-yard touchdown catch. You know, he could go out there and have 2-3 catches, like you said, and have 2 or 3 touchdowns. So that ceiling is there, and he's not necessarily an accumulator. And you see that in the 65 receptions for over 1,000 yards, which is just an incredible yard per reception there when looking at tight ends. All right, Khalil Shakir and a 25-second for George Kittle.
George Kittle, yeah.
25 first and a 25 second for James Cook and George Kittle.
George Kittle.
Kenneth Walker for George Kittle, 0.75 tight end premium.
If this was a full point, I would go George Kittle, but with it going down to a 0.75, I am leaning toward Kenneth Walker because I think in startups, there's a pretty big difference between those two if you just look at startup values.
All right. And then Deontay Johnson and a 25 second for George Kittle.
George Kittle.
Yeah, value-wise, like if we're just looking at any type of calculator, if we're just looking at numerical values, you get there with Deontay Johnson in a second. But additional context is required. Like, you have to think, if you're making that move for George Kittle, you believe it puts you over the top. you believe that your 25 second is going to be a little bit later, you have a needed tight end, or you're just looking to upgrade your flex, and you feel good about your wide receiver group. So again, that's the values on the Deontay side, I think, but it makes more than enough sense to go out there and get George Kittle. So George Kittle and Dallas Goedert, both guys that can give you production. They're a little bit older, and the windows are open to go out and acquire them right now. And as we get closer to the season, that window might close a little bit.
Yep. They'll keep climbing. It's just how it works, man.
As we typically see. All right. Now we're getting a little bit lower in value. According to PFF.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Last year, this gentleman was tight end 10. He had yards per route run over 2.6 in 2022. It was number one with at least like 30 targets or so. I forget exactly what it was. He's now tight end 22, according to me, which that should be it right there, but we'll provide other sources. Dynasty Daddy ADP, tight end 22 as well. Fantasy Calc, tight end 23. But that's Chigoziem Okonkwo. And last year, he had 50 receptions. He had 500 yards. He only had the one touchdown. But they're building something in Tennessee, at least building something for now. Like, you're not getting all these young, like, they're not building it in the sense that the Detroit Lions are building something. They're not building it in the sense the way the Houston Texans are. But they're certainly building something for now with the weapons they brought in for Will Levis. And I know Will Levis is he's a divisive player. But Chiggy, he's an athletic monster. He fits the bill from a career value trajectory up to this point to Albert O, right? That was another one. Peripheral metrics were extremely good for him at one time. Now he's bouncing around some practice squads. Where can he land? Is he even on a roster? I don't know, but that's the point. So Chigoziem Okonkwo, how do you feel, Mitch?
Like, I don't feel like Okonkwo had a terrible year last year. I think he just didn't get the touchdowns. If he would have had 3 more touchdowns, I don't think he would be ranked as low as what he is now. He just had the one. He had pretty good receptions. He had pretty good yards. Yeah, would you want a little bit more? But just a little bit more. If he had 54 receptions, if he had 60 with 600 yards, I think we would feel so much different about him going into this year. And while you were talking about how the Titans are building, dude, it reminds me so much of what the Washington Commanders, back when they were the previous name team, what they did. They brought in all these old vets. They're like, all right, this is going to work. And then the floor fell out. Like, the salary cap just killed them for a few years. I don't think the Titans are quite that scenario, but yeah, they're bringing in like the oldest dudes they can just to try to keep this going for a little bit.
Well, but also I think it makes sense. See what you have in Will Levis.
I completely, before you have to blow it up. Yeah.
Bring these guys in. You know, I'm not saying there's no excuse, because it's not like he's being surrounded by the best of the best in their prime, but still there's enough there that you can see what you have in Will Levis. So I think just doing that by itself makes sense from a franchise perspective.
Except for the Ridley contract. That contract was insane.
Yeah, we'll see how that plays out. That was a hefty price there. All right, so Chigoziem Okonkwo, 2 PPR for tight ends. Chiggy or J.K. Dobbins in a 25 third?
Okonkwo.
Chiggy or Tyler Lockett?
Chiggy.
Well, I actually have them tiered together. I was looking at tiers. I'm like,
honestly, Tyler Lockett's another one of those guys to where I'm just not. If he's in a package coming to my team, so be it, but I'm not looking to acquire him in any league.
And that's what we talked about on this week's episode of the Pivot Point, which is part of the Dynasty Theory Patreon, $5 a month, early access to view the Pivot Point or the audio, and then we spit it on the YouTube feed. We talked about some of these lower end veterans that you don't necessarily want to go out and acquire, but if you can get them in a larger package, maybe it pushes it over the top. So Tyler Lockett, like a James Conner type situation. Chigoziem Okonkwo for a 25 second.
It's kind of a hedge for me. I'll go Okonkwo though.
Really?
I would. It's hard, but I think he's a good flex play in these tight end premium leagues. I think he's a lot better than a lot of other flex plays you could see out there. Like, a lot of people will be like Khalil Shakir in their flex. I'd rather have a tight end that could give me an extra point per catch.
Yeah, and we look at last year's production, like he was right by Pat Freiermuth, right under 10 points per game. And, obviously we talked about Pat earlier. He's somebody that I'm looking to spend that 25-second on. I think you could get him for a little bit less. That's part of my issue. Yeah. And also we see the market on like a Dallas Goedert. And obviously you can't say, okay, in every league, every player is available. Yeah. Like we get that. But I would at least like to test the waters and like to think that this person did test the waters.
Well, you better agree with me on this next trade then, because I think that one makes perfect sense.
Chiggy and a 25-second for Pat Freiermuth.
25-second.
I agree. Like if it's just the 1-for-1 swap, I'll take Pat. But Chiggy is giving you, he's giving you the upside. Unfortunately, there's a really good possibility that they're closer in points per game production this year than I would like. I'm still very hopeful that Pat Freiermuth bounces back, but there's still a chance that might not happen. So you're going Chiggy across the board.
I am, yes.
I think you should be going out and trying to
I have a lot.
Do you? Okay.
I got a lot last off season. Like I didn't move off him at all. I'm completely okay with where he's valued right now.
All right. Well, let's get your shovel out. We're going to dig a little deeper. This gentleman.
I picked this guy for you. You already know my feelings on him. I got him just for you.
I know. So it's Mike Gesicki. He's 28 years old. Last couple of years, they haven't been great. Bounced around a little bit. Miami, New England. Now we're in Cincinnati. They have a need. Well, some might think they don't, but they have a need coming out of the slot.
Yes.
Mike Gesicki can really carve a rollout for himself, but in the same breath, like they still have Tanner Hudson. The tight end room is murky enough that I think Eric All is a nice investment at his cost, which is essentially free. Mm-hmm. I was getting a lot of him in the 4th round of rookie drafts, free agency or waivers after the fact. But Mike Gesicki, like the opportunity is there.
He's somebody you could talk yourself into. I mean, you can look at it and be like, look, pass funnel offense. It's going to go to Higgins. It's going to go to Chase. And you could have hope for that wide receiver 3 spot, whether it's Burton or I can't say Andreas. I can't say his last name from last year.
Yoshivas?
Yeah. So it could be him, but there is opportunity. And we've seen the Bengals starting tight end get hyped in previous years. Last year, no, because Irv Smith was absolute garbage. But before, Hayden Hurst got paid because he played with Joe Burrow. There's opportunity there. It's just, but his value is so low. He's a guy that I really think when you guys see these trades, besides one of them, but when you see the trades, you're going to be like, you know what? This actually isn't terrible to go out and try to get him on your roster. As bad as he is.
Yeah, you can tell from my voice, like I have been green.
Yeah.
I think
I had to scroll pretty far to find him too.
Now there is upside, but we talk about realistic range of outcomes here in 2024. And realistically, probably a better shot than not that he ends up 200 to 300 receiving yards this year.
Yes.
And it's like, okay, we're spending time on our fine Sunday morning talking about this guy.
Hey, you guys try to find 5 tight ends to talk about, all right? This isn't my fault. This is what I was given.
All right. So Mike Gesicki or a 25-4th?
Mike Gesicki.
Mike Gesicki and a 25-2nd for Dallas Goedert and a 25-3rd. But this goes back to the market on Dallas Goedert.
I figure this is your trade. I was looking the 2nd, the 3rd flip. John probably either talked somebody into it or this is what he did. I'm going to take Dallas Goedert, but I completely understand this trade.
I'm taking Dallas Goedert here quite easily.
Yeah.
And then Mike Gesicki for a 26-2nd and a 25-3rd. This is a start 12.
Yeah, I'm taking the 2nd every day of the week.
Like, it's so crazy. You look at the range of values here. Mm-hmm. Somebody was willingly giving a 26-2nd, any second for Mike Gesicki. And then somebody was giving him away for a 4th. Maybe that was a situation where it's like, hey, I'm going to cut this guy if anybody wants to throw a 4th or even fab. And then you see an upgrade. So it's like, yeah, I'm above market, but if market is upgrading Dallas Goedert, I'm not above market then. Like that's, or if it's a 26 second, I don't know. You can hear the lack of conviction in my voice. Like the upside is there.
Yeah.
I think like realistically do 8 to 10 PPR, 8 to 10, 2 PPR points per game.
Can he get to 50 catches, 500 yards? I think yes. I think that's easily within his wheelhouse this year. Is it enough for him to be a starter on your teams? You'll have to look at your teams and figure out if that's actually a contributing factor or not. If it's not, if that's going to end up being your tight end 4, then there's no reason to even go out and get him for a 4th. But if he is actually going to be a flex play, a bye week starter, tight ends is the most injured position in the NFL. Maybe you need him for backup, then so be it. But just make sure that he's actually going to just not be a roster fodder or clogger on your team while you're giving up draft capital to go get him.
Yeah. I
Conviction. That's what we have here.
Yeah, you can see it. Like I'm dragging here with this one. If I have the decision to make here with either of those last 2 trades or go get Eric All for free, I'll try to get Eric All for free.
Yeah, I'm not doing the last 2 trades at all. A 4th, I will do Mike Gesicki. I will take Mike Gesicki for my 4th in the 99% of my leagues if the other option is picking up Eric All off of the free agent market.
All right, so we're ending today's episode on a high note talking about the great Mike Gesicki.
Final thoughts.
All right, Mitch, final thoughts for the 254th time, some potential bounce back tight ends. And again, it's wild that George Kittle was included in this. Like I read that still and I'm like, wow, that's interesting. But the trades are there. The proof is in the pudding. Potentially go out and try that in your league. Mitch, final thoughts. What do you got for the listeners?
There's been a lot of talk in the Discord about, hey, leagues are kind of dead. They're kind of quiet right now. Is everyone else seeing this? Say yes, but I guarantee you this week, everything starts coming back. We have pretty much every single team is going to have veterans reporting this week. Then we'll start getting hype. Now we'll start getting video of all these players. I guarantee we're going to see the trade market really explode. And like John brought up earlier, the earlier you could get on these veterans, the better off you'll be, because the closer we get to Labor Day, all of a sudden you can't get a Mark Andrews, you can't get a Dallas Goedert, you can't get a George Kittle because everyone's in contending mode at that point. This is the month where people are kind of trying to decide what they're going to do. So now is the time to go out, at least maybe not Monday, Tuesday this week, but at least by Thursday, Friday this week, definitely go out and start throwing trades out to everybody.
There you have it. Hopefully Dan's getting some nice weather here at the beach. Was it a 1-day beach trip?
I don't know. He's the busiest man in the world is all that I know.
And he springs it on us last second here. Like he didn't have it planned at least for a couple days. You know, he'll be getting a talk from Dynasty Theory HR tomorrow morning. For Mitch Sorensen, Dan Lamagna, I'm John Bauer. If you enjoyed this week's episode, hit that like button and don't forget to subscribe. Hope you all have a great week.